So when thinking about Shakespeare and race, I think people have to think about multiple different time periods because clearly what was going on in Shakespeare's world is not exactly the same as what's going on in the 21st century. Nonetheless, there are some clear through lines that trace from Shakespeare into our 21st century world. In terms of a little historical background, we know that there were a few Africans that were used as court servants and slaves in the courts of Henry VII, Elizabeth I, and even James I. And in fact, James's coronation promenade into London, he wanted to be pulled by lions in a chariot, so he could ride through the streets of London on a chariot. It was too cold and lions weren't available, so he had two Africans pull the chariots instead. So there were a few Africans in the early modern period, and clearly Shakespeare was aware of the kind of global, expanding global world around him, and he figured that into many of his plays. Most people will think about Othello when thinking about Shakespeare and Race, or perhaps Merchant of Venice or Titus Andronicus. There are references to race in many of the plays that don't have explicitly racialized characters. It may surprise some people that there has been a kind of heated debate among Black actors about whether or not to play Othello now. Many Black actors are refusing to play the role, arguing that since it was a role written by a white man, intended for a white actor in Black makeup, that then it doesn't really necessitate a real Black person playing the role. In fact, they argue that this is a role about racial impersonation instead of about a racialized identity. That's only a few Black actors who have refused to do it, and many more have found it a quite powerful role for them and for their careers. But many of them have to do a kind of mental calculus about how to make sense of playing the role. So for example, Adrian Lester, who recently played the role in London at the National Theatre to great acclaim, argued vociferously that Othello is not a play about race at all, that it was actually about a militaristic society and how men interact with each other in those kind of homosocial worlds, and what happens when you throw in to the mix a woman and a love story. So for him to kind of wrap his head around the role, he really had to take race out of the calculation, and was hoping, he said, he was hoping that the audiences would see him as a soldier instead of as a Black soldier.